19-year-old Army Private Amanda Gonzalez was stationed on a U.S. Army base in Hanau, Germany in 2001. She was working as a battalion cook. When she failed to report for duty on November 5, 2001, soldiers broke down the door to her room to find her body on the floor of the barracks. She had been strangled and assaulted. Amanda was 4 months pregnant when her life was taken. Amanda grew up in Madisonville, Texas, and had many friends, her family said. In high school, she had a reputation for being caring and sticking up for her fellow classmates if they were bullied. In 2000, she surprised her family by showing up at their home with a recruiter to tell them she was joining the Army. She planned to use her GI Bill to pay for college and become a physical therapist for children. That same reputation of caring for others earned her the nickname Firecracker when she joined the military. If she saw someone being mistreated, she would step in between and just go off. Amanda's case was investigated, but unfortunately, no suspect could be identified. For 21 agonizing years, her family has been asking questions and getting no answers, as investigators made no arrests. Amanda's mother, Gloria Bates, said, "It was just the same call. Every once a week I would get a call, answer it, nothing new, saying it was the same story. It was like a recording. Every time we come visit her gravesite, I tell her I am not giving up. I am not giving up." Gloria and her husband, Michael Bates, spent years writing to lawmakers and shows like Dr. Phil and America's Most Wanted. The break in the case finally came in 2023. The Justice Department named 42-year-old Shannon L. Wilkerson, a former Armed Forces member, as the man responsible for what happened to Amanda Gonzalez. Wilkerson was arrested in Florida on February 23, 2023. He faces a maximum sentence of life in prison if convicted. He entered a not guilty plea. Officials said that Wilkerson was an active-duty soldier in 2001 and was later discharged. According to the brief indictment against Wilkerson, the suspect was discharged from the U.S. Army on July 31, 2004, and was discharged from the U.S. Army Reserve on June 12, 2007. Former FBI agent Brad Garrett said, "There is no statute of limitations for the crime of taking a life. To charge somebody in federal court with this specific crime, you have to have a fair amount of information and evidence to show that you could win this case in a trial." The arrest marked the next chapter in the investigation that lasted longer than Amanda lived and came not a moment too soon. Amanda's cousin, Deanne Lucio, said, "She still instilled that fighting spirit because she was a fighter, and it allowed all of us to keep going for her and to never give up." Amanda's mother, Gloria, said, "We have to continue on and fight for them because they cannot fight for themselves. They do not have a voice. You are their voice." Amanda's stepfather, Michael Bates, said he hopes the tragedy his family suffered can improve the conditions for female soldiers. Unfortunately, a motive for the crime has not been given. Investigators also did not elaborate on what led them to Shannon L. Wilkerson. 16-year-old Pamela Lynn Conyers lived in Baltimore, Maryland in 1970. She attended Glen Burnie High School. On the evening of October 16, 1970, Pamela attended a high school pep rally and then drove to the Harrendale Plaza Mall at around 8:30 p.m. Pamela never returned home from running her errands, and her family reported her missing. 4 days later, authorities discovered her body in a wooded area. Her body was found between the eastbound and westbound lanes of Maryland Route 177, extending into Millersville, Maryland. She had been strangled and assaulted. Nearby, between Mountain Road and Route 100, they found the family car that she had been driving. Nothing in the car indicated where Pamela was or what had happened to her. When investigators collected evidence from the crime scene, they had no idea how it would later be used. The case was investigated using traditional methods, but unfortunately, a suspect could not be identified and the case went cold. Finally, on March 10, 2023, law enforcement officials from the Anne Arundel County Police Department announced that they finally solved Pamela's case. They identified Forrest Clyde Williams III as the man responsible. He was identified using DNA technology and genetics research. Frustratingly, he passed away in 2018 of natural causes. Anne Arundel County police officials said there was no evidence to suggest Pamela knew Williams. Federal and local officials praised detectives for pursuing a decades-long search for justice in the case. FBI agent Tom Sobocinski said, "We are pleased to deliver a measure of justice for Pamela Conyers and her loved ones. Cases may grow cold, investigators may change, but this proves that for law enforcement, victims are never forgotten." Detectives used DNA analysis and a process called investigative genetic genealogy, neither of which existed when Pamela's life was ended in 1970, Sobocinski said. Cold case detectives recently developed a DNA profile that they compared to information available in publicly accessible genealogical databases. That allowed them to identify potential relatives of the suspect, create a family tree, and ultimately pinpoint Williams. Sobocinski declined to specify which relatives led them to Williams or describe the process in detail. He did say that the case demonstrates how evolving technology allows law enforcement to solve cold cases, a process that has given hope where previously there may have been none. Such genealogical investigations have revolutionized cold case investigations across the country in recent years. Though privacy advocates have expressed concern about the implications of law enforcement accessing public genealogy databases. Anne Arundel County officials provided little information about Williams, saying only that he had a sparse criminal history and spent most of his life in Virginia. He was 21 years old back in 1970. His family moved to Maryland when Williams was a teenager, and he attended an Anne Arundel County high school. He moved back to Virginia sometime later. Police presented an old mugshot of Williams from the early 1970s, saying he was arrested locally on minor counts, including drunk and disorderly conduct. Williams was survived by 2 children and many other relatives, according to his obituary. Anne Arundel County Police Chief Amal Awad said during the news conference that if Williams was still alive, he would have been charged with taking the life of Pamela Conyers. She was quite simply doing what most 16-year-old high school students did back then, living her life, creating memories, and spending precious moments with her family and friends. Simply celebrating and enjoying the essence of her teen years until her life was tragically and selfishly taken. Pamela was never forgotten, nor will she ever be forgotten, the chief added. Michael Golden, a high school classmate of Pamela, said the announcement brought some sense of closure, but also raised more questions. Golden attended the news conference with his high school yearbook in hand, opening it to a photo of Pamela. "It is still frustrating because I do not know anything about this guy," he said of the suspect. "It is something all of our classmates have been grappling with for all these years." Golden, who befriended Pamela during band practice, said he vividly remembers when she went missing. He recalled an image of her empty desk in trigonometry class the Monday morning after her disappearance. "I still mourn her," he said. "I got to grow old, and she did not. She is forever 16. David Wells, another longtime community member whose wife went to school with Pamela, said he was serving in the Air Force when the case was unfolding. He recalled being stationed in Hawaii and receiving letters from family members about the tragedy back home. Officials said detectives do not believe Pamela's case is connected to the slaying of Catherine Ann Sesnick, a Baltimore nun who went missing from a local shopping center. Her body was later found. She suffered blunt force trauma. That case was featured in a 2017 Netflix documentary, The Keepers. Law enforcement said Pamela's family were notified of the development and requested privacy. 43-year-old Erick Shears lived in Houston, Texas in 2013. He was a father, family man, and friend to many. Erick was described as funny and witty. He loved to cook, and he loved to have family functions. When family members had not heard from him for a few days in January 2013, his uncle, Curtis Anderson, decided to go take a look. Curtis went to Erick's West Houston apartment on Fountain View Drive and made a gruesome discovery. Erick had been stabbed numerous times. Investigators collected forensic evidence from the crime scene and started the investigation. Family members told police that Erick had told them about a potential boyfriend, but unfortunately they did not know who this man was. Leads dried up and the case went cold. Recently, Houston police reviewed the case and conducted DNA testing on evidence that was collected back in 2013. Results from the DNA tests indicated that Raymond Lincoln was responsible for taking Erick's life. Investigators found messages between the two men that implied a relationship. Lincoln was then interviewed. He confessed to the crime. He claimed Erick made unwanted advances which led to a fight and struggle over a knife. The circumstances are extremely similar to those of a 1992 slaying for which Lincoln was convicted. The victim in that case was also a male, and Lincoln also claimed unwanted advances. 52-year-old Raymond Charles was officially charged with taking the life of Erick Shears on April 28, 2023. Detectives with the Houston Police Department called Erick's family to notify them of the development in the case. After such a long wait, his family is now ready for swift justice. Erick's uncle Curtis Anderson, who made the discovery, said, "He is living in his own hell. They are just going to put him in a cage now." Erick's cousin, Natasha Simmons, said, "I always prayed about it. I always wondered, hey Lord, this can be possible. I love him and I miss him. I miss him very much." Lincoln is being held on a $150,000 bond for the charge against him. Police are asking anyone who may have information about other cases involving Lincoln to call detectives at 713-308-3600 or Crime Stoppers at 713-222-TIPS. 16-year-old Kimberly Louiselle lived in Livingston County, Michigan in 1982. She loved poetry and spending time with her sisters. On March 20th, 1982, Kimberly left her boyfriend's home and called her mom from a gas station payphone to tell her she was on her way home. She decided to hitchhike. It was something she had done before. She started in the area of 8 Mile and Inkster Roads. She got a ride to the area of 8 Mile and Merriman Roads in Livonia. At around 6:30 p.m., she made at least 4 phone calls trying to find a ride the rest of the way home. Sadly, Kimberly never made it back home, and she was not seen alive again. Her family searched for her, tracked down her friends, but could not find any trace of her. She was reported missing to the Green Oak Township Police Department the next day. Kimberly Louiselle's mother said police kept asking her about her daughter being a runaway. She was not a runaway. She was on her way home. She said she was on her way home, Joanna Louiselle said. The days turned into weeks. Then her body was found. On April 14, 1982, Kimberly Louiselle's body was found behind a park and ride in the Island Lake Recreation Area near Grand River Avenue and Kensington Road, just 5 miles from her home. She had been assaulted, beaten, and strangled. Her personal belongings were not located. An autopsy revealed that even though she had been missing for more than 3 weeks, she lost her life 4 or 5 days before being found. Investigators with the Green Oak Township Police Department exhausted all leads before the case went cold. Kimberly's sister, Cindy Authors, dedicated herself to helping track down the perpetrator. About 15 years ago, I had just started Googling her name to see if I could find anything on her, and I found 2 really old articles that did not have the right information, Cindy Authors said. That kind of upset me that I could not find any information on it. It was like she just did not exist. So that was where I started because I wanted to correct the wrong information, and then it just went from there. Cindy Authors started a Facebook page to share information about the case, posted flyers, and tracked down her sister's friends. She became a pseudo-detective. Kimberly's case got a new set of eyes recently when Michigan State University students taking part in a cold case internship with Michigan State Police took interest. The students sifted through boxes of evidence and files, and there was a name that caught their eye: Charles David Shaw. Back in 1983, someone had tipped police that Shaw had lived in the area where Kimberly Louiselle lived. They said he had recently destroyed his apartment, and they thought it was suspicious. Police took note but never tracked Shaw down. That was interesting because in early 2023, Livingston County cold case investigators announced Shaw as the suspect in the 1983 slaying of 19-year-old Christina Castiglione. Christina lived with her mother and father in Redford Township at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen between 7:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. on March 19, 1983, walking westbound on 5 Mile Road near Lola Park in Redford Township. Her mother reported her missing on March 21, 1983. Her body was found on March 29, 1983 in the Oak Grove State Game Area on Fawcett Road in Deerfield Township. Police were able to obtain DNA from Christina's body. In March 2022, investigators applied and received grant funding through Season of Justice, a nonprofit organization dedicated to funding DNA testing on unsolved cold cases. In May 2022, the DNA evidence was sent to Othram Lab in Texas, the company behind DNA Solves. Othram used the genealogical profile to identify leads in the case and turned that evidence over to investigators. Investigators said through that work and cooperation from the suspect's family, they were able to identify beyond a reasonable doubt who the perpetrator was. The cooperation of the Shaw family during the investigation was paramount to identifying Charles Shaw as the person responsible for what had happened to Christina Castiglione, Livingston County investigators said in a press release. Investigators then began focusing on Shaw as a suspect in Kimberly Louiselle's case. They created maps of areas where he was known to spend time, like where he lived and where he worked, and they discovered that those locations surrounded Kimberly's location. Investigators did a property audit on all the property and all the evidence that they had in the case. The students and detectives took that evidence to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab and asked for it to be retested. They were hoping for a miracle. Then, 4 months later, they got a hit. DNA was found on one of the items that had been collected from the crime scene. The DNA had been among the evidence for 40 years and had gone unnoticed. The cell was uploaded into the system and linked to Shaw. The announcement came in September 2023. Investigators believe Shaw kidnapped Kimberly while she was walking. Police said they are 100% confident that Charles David Shaw is responsible for taking the life of Kimberly Louiselle. Shaw's body was found in Detroit on November 27, 1983. The medical examiner's report listed the cause as accidental asphyxiation. Unfortunately, there will then never really be justice. Shaw had several interactions with law enforcement beginning at a young age. One such interaction resulted in his arrest in 1981 for the attempted abduction of a woman in the Fowlerville McDonald's parking lot. Detectives are exploring the possibility that Shaw is responsible for additional crimes during the early 1970s until his end in November 1983. Anyone with information is asked to contact Detective Sergeant Larry Rothman of the Michigan State Police at 313-407-9379. Cindy Authors posted, "Kim, I love you, I miss you, and I will never let you be forgotten. I kept my promise. It's over." She also posted a picture of herself and her parents and sister Kathy standing with Michigan State Police cold case detective Sergeant Larry Rothman. Her father is holding a picture of Kimberly. 37-year-old Robin War Lawrence lived in Fairfax, Virginia in 1994. She was married to Ollie Lawrence. They had a 2-year-old daughter together. Robin worked in the promotions department of Merchants Tire and Auto Centers. In November 1994, Ollie was out of the country on a work trip. He grew concerned when he was unable to reach Robin. He asked a family friend to check in on her. The family friend went to their home on November 20th, 1994 at 12:30 p.m. and discovered a heinous and tragic scene. Robin Lawrence's body was found inside the house, located in the 8600 block of Reska Lane in Springfield, Massachusetts. She had been stabbed. Her daughter was left unharmed in another room. She was alone in the house over the weekend until her mother's body was discovered. Investigators were able to locate DNA belonging to the perpetrator at the crime scene. It was tested, but technology at the time was not advanced enough to find a match. In 2019, cold case detectives began working with Parabon Nanolabs, a company in Northern Virginia that specializes in DNA phenotyping and genetic genealogy analysis. The company worked to build a family tree to narrow down who the suspect could be. The company uses processes that predict physical appearance and biological relationships from unidentified DNA evidence. For 3 years, detectives used the family tree to try to put things together, and ultimately they were led to 51-year-old Stephen Smirk of Niskayuna, New York. Once Smirk was identified, police used digital composite sketches from Parabon to estimate what Smirk may have looked like at the time of the crime. That image was compared to photos of Smirk as a younger man. Detectives traveled to New York, spoke to Smirk, and collected a DNA sample. The detectives also left a business card with Smirk. When they returned to their hotel, he called and confessed to the crime. Stephen Smirk said that he is ready to talk. He then went to the local police station and turned himself in. Detectives then had a conversation with him where Smirk confessed to and fully described his slaying and robbing of Robin Lawrence. In September 2023, a news conference was held by the Fairfax County Police Department. They announced that Stephen Smirk had been taken into custody and that he was charged with taking Robin's life. Eli Corey, Deputy Chief of Investigations, said that the crime was a randomly selected act with no connection between Smirk and Robin. It was also noted that Smirk has no criminal history and that this is the first time he was ever arrested. Corey said that Smirk will be extradited from New York to Virginia. He also said that Smirk is not a person of interest or suspect in any other crimes that the department is aware of. Smirk, who is now married with 2 children, was serving as an active duty member of the Army at the time that the crime occurred. After almost 30 years of work, Smirk is behind bars and he is going to be held accountable for his actions, Corey said. Members of Lawrence's family, including her surviving daughter, attended the news conference but did not take any questions. Robin's husband, Ollie Lawrence, did later state that he was flabbergasted to hear a suspect had been arrested. "You could have probably knocked me over with a feather," Ollie said. "After all of this time, you have hope, but you also wonder, will they really find someone after 29 years?"